My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 571, Frier and Frigga. Watson was merciful to everyone, even King Landar III. However, it was clear that King Landar III did not repent because of his kindness, so no one should blame him for being unkind. Watson extended his right hand toward King Landar III and pressed it against his chest. The human chess piece on his chest flew out with a glow, creating another King Landar III next to the original one. The two kings immediately turned into rays of light and fused in midair. Congratulations, Master, for fusing with 2 Diamond Tier Peak Elites and obtaining a Starlight Tier Servant. Starlight Tier Servant, King Landar III, Frier. Position, King. Abilities, controls the authority of the original Holy Dragon Kingdom's 7 gods and a part of the original Demonis. Additional abilities, God of Royal Authority, the upgraded King Landar III is a god that symbolizes secular royal authority. He controls the royal authority of the Divine Kingdom and can forcefully control the thoughts of others, turning them into his puppets. After the fusion, information about the fused King Landar III appeared in Watson's eyes. Other than the aura on his body appearing stronger than before, the newly fused King Landar III was no different from before. Greetings, Honorable Master. The fused King Landar III shook his head, then knelt on one knee before Watson with respect in his eyes. He was no longer the previous emperor who had schemed against Watson. Instead, he was Watson's most humble servant. Get up. Watson waved his hand, his expression seemed conflicted. If he could, he would have fused King Landar III because there were many secrets that he still did not know. For example, how many experiments had King Landar III done over the years to resurrect Avril, how many people like Sven had been harmed, and how King Landar III had colluded with the gods. Those were the crimes that Watson knew. He could force King Landar III to answer those questions, but there were still many things that he did not know. Without questions, he would not have the answers. King Landar III should know the power I have. Based on his personality, he would not have fallen out with me before he could fight me. Why was he so reckless this time? Not only was his technique simple and crude, he did not even resist after I discovered him. Instead, he chose to commit suicide. Something is not right. Watson narrowed his eyes. He did not feel at ease after fusing King Landar III, and he even felt uneasy. It was as if he did not see that King Landar III had taken every step of the way to scheme against him, he only made a mistake at the very last stage. Otherwise, he would not be able to stand there so comfortably. Since King Landar III had plotted against him again, why were his methods so different from before? While he was thinking, the air around him began to vibrate. Nia, who had flown away, had returned. She was holding a few elves led by Delta in her hands. All of them had fainted. Those elves were holding the black viscous liquid that King Landar III had just given them. Master, my mission is complete. Well done, Nia. Take those elves and King Landar III to my room. I'll interrogate them properly later. After praising Nia, Watson forcefully suppressed the uneasiness in his heart. He turned around and flew toward his residence in the planetary fortress. At the same time, there were 9 huge starlight barriers outside the planetary fortress. Those 9 starlight barriers stretched across the sky and earth. Regardless of whether they were creatures flying in the sky or underground, as long as they were below the starlight tier, they would not be able to break through those barriers. However, in the outermost of those 9 starlight barriers, a fist-sized hole suddenly appeared in a specific spot. A mass of dark red liquid crawled out of the hole. When it emerged, there was no reaction from the starlight barrier. After the scarlet liquid left the starlight barrier, it squirmed in the air and took the outline of a young girl's body. The girl's eyes were red, and her hair was rather strange. It seemed to be alive and was dancing in the air. Her hair also had snake heads with their tongues sticking out. If one looked carefully, one would discover that it was just hair. The strangest thing was the girl's face. If Watson were there, he would definitely cry out in surprise. That was because that girl's face was 70% similar to King Landar III. If one compared her to his daughter, Kiana, the similarity could be as high as 90%. Wow, I'm finally out. This way, half of the second step of the plan is already successful. The girl stretched her body and turned around to look at the hole that was recovering in the starlight barrier. The corners of her mouth curled into a meaningful smile. It's all thanks to the primordial Demoness power that I saved when I was annihilating the Demoness cult. It's also thanks to Watson, who used the thing in his body to fuse the death elemental magic source, raising the world's level and allowing the gods to have the ability to walk on the continent. That's why my plan will succeed. That girl was King Landar III himself. As for why he had become like that, well, it was a long story. The only flaw in this body is that it's a woman, which is not really suitable for being used. King Landar III's charming words were filled with helplessness as she looked at her full bosom. At that moment, her red hair twisted into a snake's head and spoke in human language, Frier, you're too greedy. I control the yin power in the universe, which can turn you into a powerful woman. Right now, you have already grasped the power of a starlight tier elite. You have also transformed from a human into an evil god race, Medusa. What else are you dissatisfied with? Primordial Demoness, I'm not unhappy about that. I'm just complaining. Alright, let's cut the crap. It's time for me to move on to the next step of my plan. I'll let Watson be happy for a while and immerse in the joy of dealing with me. He should have already fused my body, but unfortunately, he had only fused an empty shell. The real me had already broken away from the shackles of that body. Now that I am no longer a human, it would not matter if he used the fusion magic or the race chess pieces, they could not do anything to me. The next time I returned to the Holy Dragon Kingdom, it would be the time to obtain the power in his body. Primordial Demoness, I'll need you to help me in the future. King Landar III's scarlet eyes glinted before they turned into the shape of a poisonous snake. His voice drifted in the air. He had not truly eliminated the primordial Demoness, who had given him that power. The army he had sent to destroy the Demoness Church was just an illusion. The truth was that the primordial Demoness had always been attached to his body. That was also why he had the confidence to face the kingdom's 7 gods. As long as he was willing, he could use the primordial Demoness power to advance to the starlight tier at any time. He could confront those gods head-on. The primordial Demoness was an ancient and mysterious existence. Not many people in the Holy Dragon Kingdom know about her. Only a small portion of those who survived the extermination of the Demoness cult knew about her. The primordial Demoness possessed a strong power called the Cosmic Yin. Frier, there's no need to be polite with me. You've already collected enough emotions from high-tier creatures for me to successfully advance from the Starlight tier to the peak of the Starlight tier. Just treat that as my reward. It's also beneficial to me if you can obtain that thing. After all, the energy I need to advance is different from other gods. I don't need to absorb powerful energy. I only need the endless desires of other living creatures. I hope that it can nourish my insatiable heart. Of course, as long as I obtain that power from Watson's body, not only will that world's future become our paradise, even the divine realm will also become ours. The world will change for us. I wish for your pleasant cooperation in advance. King Landar III's figure disappeared in midair with a light laugh, leaving behind only a faintly discernible voice. Oh, right. Frier, now that you've transformed into a woman, calling you by that name is no longer appropriate. Should I give you a new name? What about the name Frigga? Frigga? Let's not be hasty. Chapter 572, Fusion and Interrogation. At Watson's residence in the planetary fortress. Watson was in his bedroom. He sat on a bench and stared at the people in front of him. King Landar III knelt on one knee respectfully without raising his head. Beside him, Delta and the others were tied up and gagged. Not only were they unable to move or speak, but they were also glaring at Watson fiercely. Nia stood beside Watson, her hands placed on her lower abdomen, appearing very obedient. Nia, untie those elven assassins. Watson waved his hand, and Nia immediately went forward to pull out the strips of cloth from Delta and the other elves' mouths. Just as she pulled them out, Delta opened her mouth and shouted, "Watson, it was our error that you were able to capture us. However, we are professionally trained assassins. Don't think that we will yield to you. We won't tell you anything even if you kill us." The few elves behind Delta remained silent. However, from their determined expressions, they obviously had the same thoughts. "You guys seem to have misunderstood me. I have no intention of killing you. As for the information, you will tell me later." Watson smiled and looked at King Landar III. "Tell me, what is going on?" The elves' lips twitched when they saw that scene. King Landar III had colluded with them to kill Watson. How could King Landar III say such things? "Yes, my honorable master. Previously, I was obsessed and greedy for your powerful strength. I thought of joining forces with the elves and the Winter Nation to kill you. It's my fault for having such disrespectful thoughts. Please punish me as you see fit." King Landar III addressed Watson respectfully. What he said left Delta and the other elves in a daze. Was that for real? King Landar III, who had just said that he wanted them to deliver the letter and unite with the elves to destroy Watson, had spoken to Watson so respectfully. Was he a coward? What else? "I wanted to betray the elves and the Northern Winter Nation after obtaining your great power, Master. I want to unify the continent, have sex with my beloved Avril every day, and enjoy the peak of my life." "Stop!" Watson reached out with his hand and interrupted King Landar III's fantasy of a beautiful future. He frowned and asked, "That's not what I wanted to ask. Is your plan only as simple as uniting the elves and the Winter Nation?" "Yes, after the previous failure, I've realized that in the face of absolute power, any conspiracies and tricks are useless. Before your power grows, I'll unite the other two kingdoms because the Holy Dragon Kingdom's power is not enough. The elves still have their race chess pieces, and the Winter Nation also has powerful means left by their previous generation. Our three kingdoms can still summon the gods if that doesn't work. As long as we have enough power, we'll be able to kill you eventually, Master," King Landar III replied respectfully. He raised his head and carefully glanced at Watson as he finished speaking. "Of course, that is all in the past. I definitely don't dare have any such thoughts now. Why is the human king so obedient? Watson, what did you do to him?" If she had been surprised when she saw King Landar III reveal his secret, she was terrified then. The human king had become a prisoner. What kind of method could he have used to do that? Did he take some kind of medicine or used some kind of spell? While Delta was thinking, Watson spoke again. "As you can see, I used magic to transform him into that state. If you don't want to become the same, you'd better cooperate with me." "So, he used magic?" Delta muttered in her heart after knowing Watson's method. Things would be easier once she knew what method he used. Assassins like them had received special training in magic resistance. Normal magic was completely ineffective against them. They could even pretend to be tricked and reveal false information to Watson. "Next, I'll have to ask, how many assassins did you send to the planetary fortress? Does the Elven King have any other plans?" "We sent about 100 assassins this time. You've captured the rest of them, so you should know better. As for the Elven King's next plan, how would I know?" "You don't know?" Delta nodded. The corners of Watson's mouth curled upward, and he raised a finger as he said, "You just said that you would never surrender, even if you were killed. I want to know if that is true." "Human brat, stop talking nonsense. What can you do if we don't tell you what you want to know? Why don't you kill us? For the sake of the Elven Kingdom, we are not afraid of death." A female elf behind Delta snorted coldly and mocked. The other female elves also mocked him. It's a pity that that mission is not completed. Let's kill a few more humans before we die. Their words made Watson angry, and even Nia's face was filled with anger. They would not get out of there alive even if they gave Watson the information he wanted. Since they were going to die anyway, they might as well keep their strong will before they died. They wanted to see Watson's exasperated expression. To their surprise, Watson did not show any anger. Instead, his eyes revealed pity. He raised his finger and placed it on the elves who were speaking. Fusion system, activate. Following his actions, the elves in front of him turned into rays of light and fused in midair, turning into a single person. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing multiple Platinum Tier elves. You have obtained a Diamond Tier elf. Diamond Tier elf, unnamed. Race, Ice and Fire Tree Giant. Abilities, Giant Transformation, Frost Throwing, Inferno Hell, Lava Spew, Death Pollen, and War Mist. Additional abilities, Absolute Ice Seal, Absolute Burning. The system notification sounded, and the information appeared for Watson's eyes. Those elven bodies contained the bloodlines of different types of mythical creatures, including frost giants, balrogs, and ancient tree spirits. After the fusion, those bloodlines fused and turned into a Diamond Tier Ice and Fire Tree Giant. The fused elf was tall, fair, and beautiful. Her long emerald green hair flowed to her back, and one of her eyes was sky blue, while the other was scarlet red. One of them emitted a biting cold air, while the other looked like it was on fire. The elves before the fusion were all gorgeous, and after the fusion, their looks became even more beautiful. They were not inferior to Delta. At that moment, the fused elf knelt on one knee toward Watson and bowed her head respectfully. Chapter 573, The Three Sources of the Universe. What's going on? Delta stared blankly at the fused elf behind her, unable to speak for a long time. She thought that she had seen a lot of things, but she had never seen any magic that could turn a few people into one. That was beyond the scope of magic and was close to witchcraft. She subconsciously looked at King Landar III beside her. She did not understand what magic had caused him to become like that, but she understood then. She had been very confident in her magic resistance, but she became uncertain in the face of Watson's unknown magic. Tell me, what are the elves planning? Watson asked the newly fused elf. Since I've fused you, it's not appropriate for you to not have a name. From now on, you'll be called Claudia. Yes, my honorable master. The fused elf revealed a joyful expression. It was obvious that she liked that name very much. Other than sending assassins like us, the elves also used the supernatural evolution power contained in the race chess pieces to evolve. Now, they would have also evolved their weapons. I believe that it won't be long before a group of terrifying and deformed monsters appear in the Elven Kingdom. His Majesty wants us to attack the fortress city. It would be best if we could capture you and threaten the Holy Dragon Kingdom. If we can't capture you, we should try our best to destroy this place until the next army arrives. Claudia explained the Elven King's plan while Watson turned his gaze to Nia. What is supernatural evolution? The Elven race chess piece's power was obviously different from that of the human race. As the former king of angels, Nia should be very familiar with that problem. If you want to explain the Elven race chess piece's power, you'll have to start with the three sources that the world contained when it was first created. When the world was created, three completely different sources appeared. They are called the material source, the life source, and the energy source. The material source includes the ability to accelerate and decelerate molecules. The supernatural evolution of the Elven race chess pieces belongs to the life source, allowing creatures to break through the boundaries of normalcy. Supernatural evolution can allow any race to evolve in a stronger direction. That kind of evolution has no restrictions and is very random. For example, an ant covered in that power can turn into a dragon, or it can also become a giant, a phoenix, and other mythical creatures. As for the energy source, the various sources of magic in the world belong to the energy source. In ancient times, some race chess pieces were able to create specific sources of magic. 3 sources? That is the first time I've heard such a statement. Watson's eyes lit up as he listened to Nia's explanation. The 3 sources are the foundation of the universe. All the races in the world are manifested from those 3 sources. The sovereign tier's energy source is part of the combined power of the 3 sources. It is said that whoever can gather one of the 3 sources can dominate everything. If one can gather all 3 sources, they can dominate everything and restart the universe. Because of that theory, the gods of ancient times fought each other and started a war between the races. I see. Watson nodded. That was the first time he understood the truth of the ancient war. It turned out that the powerful gods had the same worries as humans. The gods were not the end of cultivation. There was still a long way to go. Of course, that was still too far ahead. After all, he was not even a god. Since I understand the elves' plan and the power of supernatural evolution, I can't just ignore it. That ability is not much better than my fusion system. If I let the elves use it, it would be too dangerous. I'll leave that task to Claudia. The elves sent assassins to create trouble in the human cities. I'll use the same method to return the favor. Watson was thinking about how to deal with the elves. He turned to look at Delta and said, I think Claudia is enough to sneak into the Elven Kingdom. As for you, young Master Watson, the Elven Kingdom is heavily guarded. I'm afraid it's not enough to use you to create the elves. If they interrogate you, your identity might be exposed. You might as well bring me along. As the subordinate of the 8th Elder, Daphne, I have special privileges in the Elven Kingdom. I can bring a few unfamiliar faces back with me. Delta hurriedly spoke, her tone completely different from before. After witnessing Watson's fusion technique, she could not help but tremble even if she was determined. She did not want to be like her fellow elves fused by Watson and become his slave. Just bringing me into the Elven Kingdom is not enough for me to let you go. Watson rubbed his chin and deliberately showed a hesitant attitude. Delta gritted her teeth. She seemed to have thought of something and took out a transparent container from her bosom. Inside the container was a ball of dark, viscous liquid. On the surface of the liquid were scarlet eyes that were half opened and half closed. What is that? This is something that King Landar III gave me. He said that it is a treasure that contains the power of a Starlight Tier elite and can allow me to break through the enchantment outside the planetary fortress. Now, I don't need it anymore. I'm willing to offer it to you, young Master Watson. I wonder if you are willing to let me go. Watson did not respond to Delta's words. He just stared at the container in front of him as the information appeared in his eyes. Starlight Tier material, the primordial demoness remains. Effect, this is a god's remains that contains the primordial demoness power. After using it, you can obtain a portion of her power. Additional effect, the primordial demoness controls the yin energy in the universe. It can open the yin energy source after accumulating it to a certain extent. Who would have thought that after King Landar III annihilated the demoness church, they would still keep such treasures? I wonder how many similar things are left behind. That was why Watson did not want to fuse King Landar III. No one knew what he was hiding. If it were not for Delta, he would not have discovered the remains of the primordial demoness. King Landar III, how many treasures do you have? Tell me honestly. Watson held the remains of the primordial demoness as he asked King Landar III. My honorable master, I don't have that many treasures. As King Landar III responded, he took out a few transparent containers filled with black liquid of different colors. Those are the remains of the 7 gods that I collected. I wonder if they can be considered treasures. Other than the remains of those gods, I also have some holy relics excavated from ancient ruins. Can those be regarded as treasures? Oh, right, I still have 1,000 gold coins and a few pieces of jewelry. Seeing that King Landar III was chattering non-stop as if he wanted to tell him everything he had, Watson waved his hand. There's no need to tell me about those. When we return to the royal city, I hope you can make a list of all your assets and hand it to me. As for now, you can give me the remains of those gods. The only things that seemed useful to him were the remains of those gods. Typically, those remains were formed from the energy left after the gods died. They were given to King Landar III by the original 7 gods of the kingdom to protect him. As he held the remains of 7 different gods with the remains of the primordial demoness, Watson activated the fusion system with the remains of the primordial demoness as the core. Fusion system, activate. Chapter 574, The Yin-elemental magic source. Congratulations, Master, on fusing the remains of multiple gods, obtaining the full power of the primordial demoness, and activating the Yin-elemental magic source. As the system notification sounded in his ears, the remains of several gods in front of Watson fused, turning into a massive colorless energy sphere that rose into the sky. Distorted tentacles spread out around the energy sphere. It was absorbing pride, anger, envy, lust, and other factors from every corner of the world to strengthen itself. In a short period, it had expanded into a powerful source that was no weaker than the other elements. It left behind a twisted and entwined magic symbol in the shape of an Ouroboros in the air. When the Yin element's symbol was formed, the 3 high-tier elements of chaos, life, death, and the 6 basic elements, appeared in the sky. A total of 10 powerful magic sources shone in the air. They poured even more power into the world. The creatures in different regions of the world raised their heads almost simultaneously, feeling the inexplicable emotional fluctuations flowing in the air. Some animals looked at each other and began to mate, while some magical beasts roared into the sky, launching attacks on other magical beasts. At that moment, because of the Yin-elemental magic source's appearance, the creature's desires were magnified several times, or one could say that the creature's emotions became richer. That is the Yin-elemental magic source. Interesting. Sensing the fluctuations in the air, Watson opened his right hand, and a colorless and transparent power appeared in it. That power was different from ordinary energy factors, and it did not emit any strong fluctuations. Instead, it was filled with all kinds of complicated emotions that stirred people's desires. After the Yin-elemental magic source in the sky took shape, Watson could feel the tremendous power in his body. The Yin-elemental magic source's ability appeared in his heart simultaneously. In short, the magic source had 2 abilities. One was to mobilize the emotions of others, and the other was to transform others into women. Among the 10 elements in the world, Watson was in charge of the 3 chaos, death, and yin. The power of the 3 magic sources poured into his body, making him equivalent to having 3 starlight tier energy banks. Even if he was not a god yet, with those 3 magic sources, he could fight against a starlight tier god. What happened? Delta stared blankly at the distorted magic symbols in the sky. Even though the symbols were transparent and she could not see them clearly, with her ability, she could feel that the world had changed after Watson fused with the remains of several gods. As expected of Master, he has given the world another source of magic power. Nia stood behind Watson, her face full of admiration. King Landar III, who was kneeling on one knee, had the same expression on his face. He opened his arms and felt the power flowing from the sky. As someone who Watson fused, he had absolute faith in the young man. Watson's power would be transmitted through a soul link. At that moment, Watson had just fused the Yin-elemental magic source, and that power had already been transmitted to King Landar III. I have done everything I needed to do. Everyone, go back and rest. We are scheduled to head to the place where the Elven army is stationed tomorrow morning. Watson did not allow the Yin-elemental magic source in the sky to exist for too long. After saying that, he turned around and walked away. Before he left, he went to Delta and stretched his hand to touch her shoulder. Delta was initially frightened and shocked by the appearance of the Yin-elemental magic source in the sky. However, after Watson touched her, the fear and shock on her face disappeared. It was as if he had taken those 2 emotions away. What was it like not to feel fear when one should be afraid? The answer was probably only known to Delta herself. When Watson fused the Yin-elemental magic source, the elves were stationed in a dense primitive forest some distance away from the Holy Dragon Kingdom. The power of the race chess pieces has activated that bow. It can self-evolve now. As long as it devours life, it will continuously become stronger. It is now a platinum tier weapon. As long as it consumes sufficiently powerful life forms, it will evolve into a diamond tier weapon. The Elven King held an emerald green longbow in his hand as he stood outside the camp. Verdant vines surrounded the longbow. The vines flew out and rolled up a mouse from the ground as he spoke. Needle-like spikes appeared on the vines and pierced the mouse's body. Soon, the mouse's blood was drained. As for the longbow that drained the mouse's blood, a glowing arrow appeared between the bowstrings. The Elven King released it from the bow. The arrow split in midair and turned into a glowing mouse. It left a deep pit several meters wide on the ground. The Elven King was delighted with the power of the bow and arrows. He put down the bow in his hand and could not help but look proud. With such a bow and arrow, there's no need to worry about not being able to break through to the Holy Dragon Kingdom. And I've used the race chess piece's power to cultivate an even more terrifying weapon. Our victory in this war is almost certain. There's no time to lose. Let's march toward the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Your Majesty, those weapons that can evolve on their own are not bad, but they need to be cultivated by devouring creatures. Furthermore, we've just sent Delta and the others to the fortress city. I believe that they've already infiltrated the city. It would not be good for us to act so rashly before we get their reports. Pagani, who stood near the Elven King, was known for his intelligence. He had spoken with a slightly worried tone. What's so bad about it? If Delta and the others had entered the fortress city, they would have occupied it by now. If we go over now, we can work together to retake the city. Sometimes, a battle changes rapidly. If we hesitate, we will lose a good opportunity. But Pagani wanted to dissuade him, but at that moment, an invisible wave came from the distance and spread to a more distant place. He subconsciously shook his head. Somehow, after that invisible wave passed through his body, he suddenly felt restless and wanted to conquer and kill. He was filled with confidence in the upcoming war with the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Without thinking, he subconsciously nodded in agreement with the Elven King. You are right, Your Majesty. Let's attack the Holy Dragon Kingdom right now. Fight! 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 As soon as he finished speaking, a chorus of shouts echoed. One after another, Elven soldiers walked out of their tents. Their eyes were bloodshot, and their fighting spirit was high. What's going on? Why does it feel like everyone is in high spirits? The eighth elder, Daphne, pushed the tent open and walked out with a puzzled look on her face. The Forest Dragon King, Rita, also followed suit. Two of her underlings trailed behind her. Rita's long green hair fluttered in the wind, and her slender eyebrows furrowed. Her eyes were filled with confusion and surprise. This fluctuation appears to be another magical source in the world. Did the Dragon Emperor create it? In the past 2 days, Watson had created 2 magic sources that did not exist in the world. Even if Watson had supernatural power, his efficiency was too high. The Dragon Emperor can even create magic sources consecutively. If those elves want to ambush us at night, they are just sending themselves to their deaths. Suppressing the surprise in her heart, the Forest Dragon King glanced at the elves, who were in high spirits because of the appearance of the new magic source. There was a faint disdain on his face as invisible ripples in the air spread outward. The contempt in her expression became more intense. Chapter 575, Invasion of the Elven Kingdom. That power. Watson had already created a Yin-elemental magic source. It is not in vain that I give him the god's remains. Watson is indeed an intelligent person. When I was his age, I was not as smart as he is now. Unfortunately, he is not without flaws. He relied too much on his fusion skills. Not far from the elven camp, Frigga, who had already transformed into a young girl, had red hair that fluttered in the wind. She quietly watched the elven king, who was mobilizing the elven army in the camp ahead, the corners of her mouth curled into a faint smile. Previously, she had given the primordial demoness divine remains to Dale. Other than the remains, his true body was also hidden inside. After Dale had taken the remains, he had taken the opportunity to leave the planetary fortress. That was why he could escape. As for the primordial demoness remains, he had deliberately left it for Watson. On the one hand, he wanted to avoid Watson's suspicions. On the other hand, he wanted Watson to fuse that thing. The fusion power is very strong, but it also depends on what it is fused with. Blindly fusing things will only bring me convenience, just like now. Thanks to the Yin-elemental magic source that Watson fused, my ability to control emotions has increased several times. Otherwise, I would not have been able to mobilize those people's emotions so easily. Facing the direction of the camp ahead, Frigga extended her right hand. An invisible wave spread from her palm, mixing with the wind and blowing in the direction of the camp. The impacted elven elites shouted that they should attack the Holy Dragon Kingdom. It was as if they had lost their minds due to their desire to fight. Not far away, the Forest Dragon King had the opposite expression on her face. She knew that the elves were no match for Watson. That was what she wanted to do: provoke Watson's enemies' desire to fight and lower their wariness of Watson's companions. Now, it's time for the main event. Retracting her hand in the air, she turned into a streak of light and flew in the opposite direction as the elven army began to prepare to move in the direction of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. She was flying in the direction of the Elven Kingdom. The Elven Kingdom was located in the middle of the Forest of Eternity and was very far away from the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Unfortunately, Frier had left his physical body and had been transformed into an evil god race by the primordial demoness power. He arrived at the 10,000 kilometer span in only a few minutes. What a lush scene! I haven't been here in a long time, ever since I married Avril more than 10 years ago. When Frier mentioned Avril, his expression became gentle, but soon, that too was covered by indifference. He extended his right hand toward the endless green forest below. Absolute gravity. Boom! The lush forest began to collapse, and cracks appeared on the ground. The magical beasts resting in the forest did not have time to escape before the powerful gravity crushed them, and their bodies exploded. Who is it? Someone attacked the Elven Kingdom. Do they want to die? Elves crawled out from the collapsed trees one after another. Some were covered in blood, while others had blank looks on their faces. The Forest of Eternity was transformed from the World Tree. It was a divine object from ancient times, and they would get a warning if an enemy entered that territory. So they did not know how the petite red-haired girl in front of them managed to get in. Who cares how she got in? Let's kill her. Some of the short-tempered elves drew longbows on their backs and knocked their arrows. The arrows streaked across the sky like meteors, carrying a powerful attack that pierced through the air as they flew toward Frigga. As those meteor-like arrows were about to land on her face and chest, Frigga raised her right hand. Lost direction. Numerous invisible arrowheads appeared on the arrows, causing the arrows to turn around at an even faster speed. They pierced through the throats of the archer elves, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Those elves widened their eyes, but they died and fell from the tree branches before they could react. No. Bill, what's wrong with you? Bill. The wife called out to her husband, and her friend cried out to her friend. The air was filled with despair and sadness. Bathed in those auras, Frigga took a deep breath, and her red hair fluttered freely. She seemed to be enjoying it. That strong emotion is exactly what I need. Not bad, if only it could be stronger. Frigga stretched out her hand again and pulled the elves in the forest. The elves moved through the air in a panic, but they could not stop her. They could only watch as they were crushed. Scarlet rain fell from the sky and covered the entire Forest of Eternity. The remaining elves stared blankly at the sky for a few seconds before realizing what was happening. An ear-piercing scream broke the tranquility of the forest. My emotions are strong enough now. With a cruel smile on her face, Frigga landed on the ground and walked deeper into the forest of eternity. She casually waved her hand to block the arrows from the nearby trees. Then, she casually crushed the head of an elf who had transformed into a ferocious beast. Her expression did not change. Who is she? At first, the elves still tried to attack Frigga. However, they realized that their attacks could not even break her defense. On the contrary, Frigga reached out and killed all of them with her hand. The rest of the elves fell into fear. Who was that girl? Why did she attack the elves? Was she from the Holy Dragon Kingdom? The elves were a peaceful race. They had never had any grudges with other races. If there was, it could only be from the Holy Dragon Kingdom. After all, a few days ago, the Elven King had led their army to the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Those elves unwilling to start a war or were not strong enough had to stay behind. Hey, I warn you to stop this endless killing immediately and surrender obediently. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. After Frigga wreaked havoc in the forest for a while, a loud and old voice sounded in the forest. An elder elf floated out of the forest with iron chains wrapped around his arms and legs. The iron chains intersected at his chest, forming a massive lock. That elf was tall and sturdy. He was not as tall as a typical elf, but he was even taller than an average human. 10 elves stood behind him, their bodies were exuding at least platinum tier aura. It's Elder Kai. He is one of the strongest elves in the kingdom, second only to Elder Landon. He can transform into a platinum tier lava King Kong. The other elders aren't weak either. If they're here, we're saved. The elves were happy to see those elders. However, unlike the elves that stayed in the Forest of Eternity because they were unwilling to fight, those elders remained because they advocated for war. The Elven King left them behind in case they were ambushed by the Holy Dragon Kingdom and to suppress the voices of the elves' main faction. Chapter 576, An Intense Battle. Did the Holy Dragon Kingdom send you? Are you alone? An old white-haired female elf with half a mask on her head spoke. Her eyes, hidden under the mask, were flickering. That's right. You can treat me as someone from the Holy Dragon Kingdom. I'm by myself. Frigga's red hair fluttered in the wind. The front part of her hair transformed a snake's head, and she stuck out her tongue. We can't trust her words. If she barged into the Elven Kingdom recklessly by herself, wouldn't she be courting death? It doesn't matter whether we can trust her or not. We have to capture her first. We can't let her destroy us. The other elders spoke at once. One of them, who was different from the other elves, flew out. He had long and thin vines on his body. It's Elder Hugman. He specializes in druid secret skills and archery. He can transform a platinum tier ancient war tree. In order to perfectly transform into that magical beast, his body transforms into something like a plant. One of the elves recognized that elder. Elder Hugman looked pleased when he heard their exclamations. He might not be the strongest elven elder, but he had the best archery skills. Activating the druid's secret skill, Ancient War Tree. Following the chant, the roots on Hugman's limbs rapidly multiplied and wrapped around his body. Then, those roots expanded outward and connected. In just a few seconds, it had become 100-meter long, thick ancient tree with hundreds of arms made of tree trunks, and the thick roots formed its legs. On the tree trunks were hollow-shaped eyes and big mouths. The ancient war tree was a combat weapon that the elves cultivated in ancient times. The ground shook, and long bows automatically extended from the tree's hundreds of arms. The bowstring was pulled, and arrows with powerful energy condensed on it. Each arrow was more than 10 meters long. It was better to call them arrows than spears that could pierce through everything. Platinum tier secret skill scatter meteor arrows. The 10-meter-long arrows accompanied the sounds of the ancient war tree that Hugman had transformed into. They shattered the air and flew toward Frigga from all directions. Frigga's body was like a speck of dust in front of hundreds of arrows. Without a doubt, that powerful force would shatter the earth, let alone Frigga. All the elves clenched their fists. They were ready to cheer after Frigga was killed. However, at that moment, petrify. Frigga did not move. She opened her mouth and spat out 2 words. Her snake-like red hair immediately opened its mouths at the arrows heading toward her. Sound waves rolled from all directions. Any arrows touched by the sound waves made cracking sounds in the air and condensed into arrows with stone shells. Hey! Hugman, confident in his own attack, was surprised to see his attack neutralized so easily. The huge cracks on the tree trunk suddenly contracted. You can block my attack. You must have some skills. No wonder you dared to come alone. How did you block that attack? As Hugman spoke, the ancient war tree's trunks holding the longbow began to intertwine. They turned into fewer, larger fists that fiercely smashed on the ground. Rumble! Rumble! Huge pits appeared on the ground following some rumbling sounds, and soil flew everywhere. War trample! A terrifying undulation followed Hugman's body and was transmitted toward Frigga. Everything along the way, be it rocks or trees, was shaken into dust. That strong vibration shattered everything in front of it. However, that attack was ineffective against Frigga. Earth and the divine kingdom of fertility. A layer of solid golden divine kingdom appeared beside Frigga. The outer shell of the divine kingdom, which was shining with a starlight tear radiance, resisted the powerful shockwave. It also added to the shock in the hearts of all the elves. The power of the divine kingdom? Are you a diamond tier elite? The female elder wearing a mask cried out in surprise and quickly quieted down. The power used in the divine kingdom was at least diamond tier. The elders who stayed in the forest of eternity were only platinum tier elites. However, they could only resist diamond tier elites for a while, even if they joined forces. So what if you're a diamond tier elite? Divine Spark Mask. An elven elder touched the halved mask on her face. The mask immediately exploded with a dazzling light, causing her body to expand hundreds of times in the light. She turned into a giant that was hundreds of meters tall and burning with flames. Elder Lux has also made a move. Her divinity mask is one of the treasures from the ancient elven ruins. It is said that a god made that mask, and the power of an adult giant is sealed inside it. Elder Lux can transform into a giant from ancient times with that mask. After transforming into a giant, a diamond tier aura immediately spread from her body. A diamond tier giant with a strong physical body could easily resist a god. At that moment, the fire giant that Lux had transformed into stretched its thick arms outward and grabbed the surface of the divine kingdom that Frigga had summoned, pulling it to both sides. Rib! The arms that were burning with flames tore a crack in the surface of the divine kingdom. That made all the elves happy. It's my turn next. Elder Kai was also covered in a layer of blazing flames. The flames tore the thick iron chains that were wrapped around his body, turning him into a 100-meter-tall lava King Kong. His thick arms pounded on his chest as he roared. The rolling sound waves dispersed the clouds in the sky. That King Kong looked even stronger than the fire giant that Lux had transformed into. Lava flowed over its body. It had a head made of fire elements, but it gave off an indestructible metallic feel. The thick and long chains on Elder Kai's body were not ornaments. Those chains were made of anti-magic materials and were specially made to restrain his power. The Lava King Kong was a magical beast with terrifying strength. Even in ancient times, his strength surpassed that of a giant. However, the Lava King Kong would go crazy on a full moon, so he needed to use something to restrain it. Elder Kai could free the suppression on his body when he faced Elder Kai. Elder Kai's Lava King Kong patted his chest and rushed in front of Frigga as Lux tore his divine kingdom apart. He put his palms together and smashed down on Frigga. Peak Platinum Tier Fighting Technique Lava Earth Shaking Divine Fist. His fists were completely wrapped in lava, and they smashed onto Frigga's head with a force that was faster, fiercer, and more powerful than a meteorite. When Frigga was smashed into the ground, the earth swelled into an irregular shape. Lava pillars shot out from the ground, destroying the earth in thousands of holes. The lava sprayed onto the trees around them, and the forest of eternity began to burn. The other elves carefully avoided it. They were trying to avoid being hurt by the aftershocks of the battle. Did we win? The Lava King Kong's fist had penetrated the ground within a radius of several kilometers. Many elves climbed onto the remaining trees to prevent their feet from getting burned. Elder Kai's punch could melt the ground. Even Frigga, who was also a Diamond Tier elite, would have had his bones melted under that punch. Like the other elves, Elder Kai believed that Frigga was dead because he could feel his punch hitting the enemy. This is what happens when you invade the elves. You can reflect after you reach hell. Chapter 577, A Scene from Hell. Perhaps you're the one who should reflect. The girl laughed softly, causing Elder Kai's expression to change. Before he could retreat, a huge scarlet python that was dozens of meters long emerged underground. The python opened its mouth and bit down on Elder Kai's thick arm. Lava that could melt even hard ores was rendered ineffective in front of the python's sharp teeth. The python bit Elder Kai's arms off, and he retreated with a miserable cry. The python crawled out from under the ground as it chewed on the two furry arms. Frigga stood on its back with her hands behind her back and a strand of her hair fluttered in the air. It was connected to the python's tail. It was obvious that that python was only a strand of Frigga's hair. Just a strand of Frigga's hair was enough to injure a peak Platinum Tier elite. Such strength was enough to scare other people. How is that possible? Aren't you at Diamond Tier? Gritting his teeth in pain, Elder Kai reverted from his Lava King Kong form to his elf form. Blood flowed down his broken hands and along his wrists. If Friggs had been at Diamond Tier, she would not have been able to resolve the continuous attacks from him and the other elders so easily. Even if Sword Saint Reed, the strongest warrior in the Holy Dragon Kingdom, were there, the attacks would fluster him. The girl was so calm. Did that mean she was even more powerful than Reed? When did such a powerful person appear in the Holy Dragon Kingdom? How could they not know about her? I never said that I'm a Diamond Tier warrior. All right, the game is over. You should accept your death. The relaxed smile on Frigga's face disappeared, and her expression became serious. The giant python began to approach the elves. Don't talk so arrogantly. If you want to hurt them, you'll have to go through me first, Elder Lux's fire giant said in a muffled voice. It strode toward Frigga and slapped her like a mosquito. Die! Frigga waved her hands. She did not do anything special. Her body was like an ant compared to the fire giant, but she was not attacked yet. A huge hole suddenly appeared in the fire giant's chest. Its tall body knelt in front of her like a landslide. Its arms, which contained great power, fell. Elder Lux had lost. And it was only one move. The elves were shocked. They did not even see Frier's method clearly, and the fire giant that Lux had transformed into knelt on the ground. How powerful was that? After that, Hugman, who had just transformed into an ancient war tree, spread his hundreds of trunk-shaped arms outward, forming a longbow. He was ready to shoot at Frigga. However, before his attack formed, Frigga kicked the flame giant. The giant, which was hundreds of meters tall, flew backward like a toy. Its huge body flew outward and collided with Hugman. The flame giant collided with the ancient war tree, and raging flames spread rapidly. A long scorched mark was left on the ground. Many elves who did not dodge it in time were swept into it and burned into ashes. Well, that takes care of the two of them. Now it's your turn. Frigga's gaze fell on the remaining elder in the sky, who had not made a move yet. When she realized they were angry, her heart felt as if a basin of ice water had poured onto it. Cold air rushed to her forehead, and she subconsciously took 2 steps backward. I'm too lazy to make a move on weaklings like you. You should just kill yourself. Frigga looked a little disappointed. Her eyes turned into scarlet vertical pupils, which looked majestically despaired, making it difficult for people to resist. Those emotions spread toward the few elven elders in the sky. They looked fearful. They reached out with their hands spontaneously and stabbed their necks. Frigga did not make a move. In the end, the elven elders took their own lives. The other elves were so frightened that their faces paled. Just a few words and a few platinum-tier elders had committed suicide. If that kind of strange magic were used on them, they would not be able to resist it. Run! Let's get out of here! Many elves reacted by running away from Frigga while howling in pain. Unfortunately, they had not run far when Frigga looked at them with her scarlet eyes. Petrify! The elves froze on the spot and turned into stones. Then, the stones were burned by the flames and shattered. There were at least 1,000,000 elves in the Elven Kingdom. At that moment, the houses were also burned to ashes. The peaceful kingdom was in a sea of fire, and only the smell of despair was spreading. In the forest of eternity's deepest part, in the direction of the moon well. Vivian sat beside the moon well, holding a harp in her hand and playing it gently. As she played, the chains around her hands made a rattling sound. At that moment, she seemed to hear something, so she suddenly stopped playing. What's happening? I smell burning and blood. Vivian frowned. She could feel a sense of restlessness coming from the grass as if something terrible was approaching. Is someone invading the Elven Kingdom? The Holy Dragon Kingdom. Vivian looked up, and she saw flames burning in the forest of eternity. Countless elves cried out desperately for help, the sound nearly destroyed her eardrum, and she bit her lips. Fortunately, there was a magic seal around the moon well. The flames had not spread to her yet, but it was only a matter of time. It could only be retribution if the Holy Dragon Kingdom had attacked them. None of those would have happened if the Elven King had not insisted on attacking the Holy Dragon Kingdom. However, she was also an elf. She would not survive it if the Elven Kingdom were destroyed. Vivian got up and took a petal from her hair. She touched the edge, and it immediately sharpened. She hid the flower and stared at the seal in front of the moon well. She felt as if something was approaching, and the seal began to break. Crack! Then, she heard a crisp sound. The person who had broken the seal walked into the area. Vivian was stunned. She thought it would be the army from the Holy Dragon Kingdom or perhaps the person she longed for. However, it was a girl. She looked familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. The girl smiled at her. Miss Vivian, I think this is the first time that we've met. I have heard a lot about you. After all, you were Antonio's sweetheart who fought with my ancestors to conquer the kingdom 400 years ago. I would like to borrow you for a while. I hope you don't mind. You are. Vivian's eyes widened as a thought flashed through her mind. However, that thought was so ridiculous that she could not believe it herself. Before she could finish her sentence, the girl was already in front of her. Then, she felt a pain in her neck and fell to the ground. Before she fainted, she saw the seal of the moon well, before she realized that the entire Elven Kingdom was in flames. Charred corpses were hanging from trees or lying on the ground. The hellish scene was deeply engraved in her mind. Then, she closed her eyes. Chapter 578, Truly Cruel. At the Sword Saint's courtyard in the Holy Dragon Kingdom's royal capital, Antonio leisurely lay on a chair and drank tea. The chair swayed back and forth, allowing him to enjoy the sunlight fully. I heard that Watson caught a group of elven assassins during the day and used the fusion system to turn King Landar III into one of his own. Most importantly, he created a new magic source. If this goes on, the war will soon end. It was evening. What Watson had done during the day had long been communicated to him by the sea folks through the Dragon Palace network that connected the entire kingdom. After all, Watson had created a new magic source and fused King Landar III. Watson would have to report to him because he had the peak starlight tier weapon that Watson had created. He could borrow the new magic source's power. The more magic sources there were in the world, the stronger he would become. Similarly, the others around Watson were the same. As long as they had given their faith to Watson, they would receive his gifts. The stronger the energy Watson created, the more benefits those believers would receive. If this goes on, I don't have to do anything. I just need to drink tea and bask in the sun every day to become stronger. Who knows, I might even break through to starlight tier and become a god in my lifetime. Antonio fantasized about the future as he stroked the stubble that did not exist on his face. If I can reach the starlight tier, I can take Vivian to a place without war and strife to live a peaceful life. Before Watson left, I told him to try his best to ensure Vivian's safety during the war with the elves. I believed that he would be able to do it. He had planned to leave the capital after Watson grew up and go to the Elven kingdom to see Vivian. However, King Landar III had been scheming against Watson, so he could not leave. Since Watson had used the fusion system to solve their problem with King Landar III, he had nothing to worry about. Antonio sipped from his teacup leisurely. The tea from the south of the Holy Dragon Kingdom is different, indeed. It's delicious. It was impossible to drink such good tea in the capital in the past. Now, it's all thanks to Watson. Due to the Dragon Palace network and the appearance of the planetary fortress, the goods in the kingdom could be transported quickly. As a result, many places could enjoy the delicious food because they could ferry them quickly. They can enjoy the food after waiting for only a few minutes. The prices of the goods would also be reduced, promoting productivity and making the Holy Dragon Kingdom better. Hiss! A sharp pain came from the tip of his tongue, interrupting Antonio's thoughts. He opened his mouth and spat out a sharp tea leaf that did not fit in with the other tea leaves. How could there be such sharp tea leaves in the teacup? Those servants are just too careless. Someone else might have been injured after drinking that tea. Antonio frowned. He felt a vague sense of unease in his heart. He was an astrologer and was proficient in astrology and tarot cards. He could use astrology to spy on the fate of a person or even a kingdom. He had not used that skill for a long time since he accepted Watson as his disciple, but it did not mean that he was rusty. At that moment, he could feel strong malice constantly invading him from unknown places, making him feel uncomfortable. I keep feeling that something terrible is going to happen. Did Reed go behind my back to ask Watson for a new weapon? Did the maids discover that I farted a few times in the hot spring? Antonio muttered in confusion. He extended his right hand, and threads appeared in his hand. Those threads were the threads of a peak starlight tier tool. Using those threads, he could use the energy from the magic source to draw the star tarot card for divination. Before he could start, a scarlet light flashed across the space not far away from him. A scarlet door appeared, and a scarlet-haired girl walked out from behind it. Antonio, long time no see. How have you been? You look worried. Did you encounter anything troubling? The primordial demoness aura. Are you from the demoness church? That couldn't be. That power surpassed any mortal's skills. Are you a starlight tier elite? There are only a few of those elites in the world, and Watson had a hand in upgrading their tiers. I wouldn't have not known you. However, I've never seen you before. Are you? When the girl heard Antonio's words, she revealed a look of approval. It meant that Antonio was right. She gestured for Antonio to continue. Perhaps you're not from this world. Are you a god from the divine realm? Watson had managed to upgrade the world's level, so I've been dreading this problem. I didn't expect it to occur so quickly. Tell me, which of the 7 gods are you? Antonio took 2 steps backward. The threads covered his entire body, and he stared at the girl in front of him vigilantly. No wonder I had a bad feeling. It turns out that one of the 7 gods is here for revenge. I should be able to hold my own against a starlight tier elite. I need to convey this information to Watson via magic and wait for him to come here. The only Starlight tier elites that Watson had offended were the kingdom's 7 gods. Therefore, when Antonio saw the young girl in front of him, the first thing he thought of was that one of the gods had come for their revenge. Black lines appeared on the young girl's face. Antonio, I've misjudged your insight. Well, I never intended to expose my identity. I'll just tell you the purpose of my visit, but I hope you can see something before that. As she spoke, the girl opened her hands, and a scene formed by magic appeared in front of Antonio. His eyes widened when he saw the scene. That is. See, she's in my hands now. If you want her to live, you'll have to listen to me. What did you do to her? Do you want to kill her? You're truly cruel. That's nothing. If you don't agree to do as I say, I'll let you know what cruelty means. You'll tie her up and roast her over the fire? Is there anything more cruel than that? Roast over the fire. The girl was stunned. She looked at the magic screen in her hand and saw a fat bare-skinned wild boar. It was placed over a fire, and it continued to struggle and wail as it was roasted. While she was watching that, Antonio mocked her from the side. How pitiful! That was the first time I saw a wild boar roasted over the fire while it was still alive. That cooking method is cruel, indeed. I'm sorry. That was when I was eating. It's the next scene, so watch it again. The girl appeared to be embarrassed. The scene changed from a roasted wild boar to a tied-up beautiful girl with a piece of cloth wrapped around her mouth. She was constantly twisting and whimpering. The girl was surrounded by scarlet vipers in poisonous fog. Any magical beast that passed by had quickly left out of fear. Chapter 579, Under Duress. Vivian. Antonio's body trembled as soon as he saw the woman in the picture. He froze on the spot, and then a look of disbelief appeared on his face. For more than 400 years, the woman he had always missed had appeared in front of him. 400 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Human, if you want to drink water from the spring of life, you must promise me a promise. You must promise me to protect the Elven kingdom in the future. Otherwise, I will not give you water from the spring of life. The girl's voice rang in his mind. That was the first time he met Vivian. It was a sunny day. He cut his way to the moon well. Vivian opened her arms and refused to give in. She looked cute in her determination. Antonio, why do you always get hurt so badly every time you go out? Is it really that important to build a new kingdom? Is it not good to live in existing kingdoms? Why don't you stay in the Elven kingdom? The memories in his mind changed. Antonio lay on a soft grassland. The girl used a handkerchief to wipe his wounds with the water from the spring of life. Hot tears mixed with spring of life water flowed, and he could not tell if what he felt on his skin was tears or water from the spring of life. Who cried for him for the first time, and who was sad for him? The memories changed again. At that time, it was time for him and Vivian to part. He stood among the hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the Holy Dragon Kingdom and looked back. Behind him was the direction of the Elven Kingdom. Vivian was shackled. Several elves glared at her in anger. Vivian, you traitor of the elves! You used the precious spring of life for a human. It's your fault that the elves were defeated. She did not care about those words. Her eyes looked through the sea of people and stopped at Antonio. Will we meet again? I think, no. Antonio could not bear the look in his memory. He looked away. Antonio, you promised me that if I gave you the spring of life, you would protect the Elven kingdom. If you can't keep your promise, I want you to promise me that you will come to see me when that time comes. The memory came to an abrupt end. The memory of more than 400 years was still alive. Looking at the woman in the picture, Antonio could not help but wet his eyes with tears. He began to move forward. Stop! The girl rubbed her hands, and the magic picture in her hand disappeared. Antonio recovered from his daze and looked at her with red eyes. Who are you? What did you do to Vivian? I can't believe that your feelings for that elf girl have not changed after 400 years. Don't worry. I haven't done anything to her yet, but I can't promise that I won't do it again. If you want me to let her go, you have to agree to one condition. What condition? The condition is that you have to go to the Moonwell in the Elven Kingdom tomorrow and by yourself. Is it that simple? Antonio frowned. When he saw Vivian, he was blinded by his emotions. Then, he felt like something was wrong with the girl's request. If the girl wanted him, she could have used Vivian's life to force him to do something, but she only wanted him to go to the Moonwell in the Elven Kingdom one day later. What was so special about that time and place? Who was the girl in front of him? Why did she do that? The girl's tone was very similar to the one he knew, but he knew that the person had been dealt with, and the gender did not match. While he was puzzled, the girl in front of him said, "That's all I have to say. Remember to go there tomorrow night. Otherwise, the person you love will die. If you dare to touch Vivian, I will never let you go." Even though his tone was light, no one would doubt the strength of his words. That will depend on your performance. Without further ado, I'm leaving. With a chuckle, the girl turned around. A scarlet portal appeared behind her, and she was about to step inside. At that moment, whoosh! A cold sword aura whistled past, accompanied by a majestic voice. Commandment. The sword aura cut the scarlet portal in half, and the girl's body too. After the cold sword aura, Sword Saint Reed sat on the huge commandment throne, floating in front of the girl's body with a solemn expression. The sword aura in his hand had not dissipated yet. Antonio, it seems like you are in trouble. Don't worry. I have used the throne of commandment to seal the surroundings. That woman is unable to use any of her abilities. Fortunately, I'm here. Otherwise, she would have escaped. It looks like the throne of commandment is better than your weapon. Reed, stop talking nonsense. My weapon is definitely more powerful. I was only hesitating about whether to kill that woman or not. Otherwise, I would have taken action long ago. Antonio curled his lips and said, "Sure. Antonio, don't be stubborn. Is it so difficult for you to admit that others can be powerful as well? If you insist on being stubborn, I will cancel my attack right now and let that woman go. See if you can catch her. Let her go. I'm not afraid at all. If you wish." While the two of them were arguing, the two halves of the girl's body suddenly moved. Fine blood threads emerged from the wound, pulling her body together and making her look as good as before. It's not a good habit to ambush someone. Fortunately, my body structure is completely different from a human's, so it's not that easy to kill me. The girl sighed with a relaxed expression as she touched the wound on her lower back. What's going on? Reed, didn't you say that you've completely sealed the energy in that area? Did you cancel the throne of commandment? Antonio's expression was dull. Reed, who was beside him, did not look too good either. I can't remove it. How did she move? Furthermore, she took my attack head-on, but she's unharmed. All right, I really have to say goodbye now. However, I can't be attacked for nothing. I expect Reed to go to the Moonwell in the Forest of Eternity as well. The girl stretched her back. She turned around and walked toward the scarlet portal. It appeared again. As she walked, she said, "When you arrive, I will prepare a big gift for the two of you." Wait, you can't leave. Antonio became anxious. He summoned the fusion thread of the dual god and wrapped it around the girl. During that process, the fusion thread of the dual god had the illusion of a colorful magic source with different elements. It could connect to all the existing magic sources in the world. At that moment, Antonio did not hold back. The power released by all the magic sources could raise the entire capital to the ground. However, as soon as those magic sources appeared, they shattered like bubbles, causing the flying fusion thread of the dual god to wrap around nothing. The girl entered the teleportation portal and vanished from the spot. "Reed, why didn't you cancel the Throne of Commandments?" Antonio turned around and questioned him angrily. "It did not seal the enemy's ability, but instead, it sealed his. That was too infuriating. Didn't I react in time?" Reed scratched his head in embarrassment, "But that incident inspired me. That person was able to resist the sealing power of my Throne of Commandments and leave, but you were unable to use the fusion thread of the dual god. Do you know what that proves?" "What does it prove?" "It proves that the fusion thread of the dual god is not as powerful as the Throne of Commandments. Do you want to fight?" "I'm just joking." With a cough, Reed stared at the place where the girl had just left, and his expression became serious. "The Throne of Commandments is a peak starlight tier weapon. Even a god's power would be sealed, right?" The girl could still move, so her strength was obviously extraordinary. "She has summoned us tomorrow. It must be something bad. Do you want to tell Watson about that?" "No, this is my private matter." Antonio hesitated for a moment and shook his head. "That mysterious girl probably has no intention of dealing with us. Otherwise, with her strength, she would have attacked just now. Furthermore, Watson is currently defending against the Elven Kingdom. At a critical moment, it is not appropriate for us to disturb him over such a small matter." "That makes sense. Of course, if you encounter a danger that you can't solve, you can use magic to summon Watson. He can deal with the Elven Kingdom anytime he wants. There's only one perfect master like me. I'm quite flexible about it." Reed's face was pale when he rolled his eyes. Chapter 580, Encountering the Elven Army. Noon the next day. Watson had been preparing for the day to infiltrate the elves. He first asked Delta about their language and then their etiquettes and living habits. He hid in his room the entire night. When you meet the elves, you have to greet them with honorifics. However, you don't have to lower your head when facing an older elf. Instead, you have to stomp your feet. Facing an older elf of a different tier requires you to stomp your feet a different number of times. That is different from humans. Standing in front of a huge bronze mirror, Watson wore a suit made of leaves that fit him. He looked at it over and over again. At that moment, his hair had changed from the previous golden color to a light green color. He also had pointed ears. Those changes were due to his ever-changing magic. Even with his transformation into an elf, coupled with his learned speech skills and manners, no elf would see through his disguise. "Everything is ready. It's time to set off." Watson tidied his cufflinks and turned to walk outside. Nia, Delta, and Claudia were already waiting outside the door. Apart from Delta, who had a complicated expression on her face, the other two women seemed respectful. "My honorable master, the magical beasts are ready. I have also planned the route. I guarantee that we will arrive at the Elven Kingdom in the shortest time possible." Claudia stomped her feet and saluted Watson. "I understand." Watson did not plan to face the elf army head-on at that time. Instead, he chose to sneak into the Elven Kingdom. If he could control the Elven Kingdom, the Elven King and his army would be forced to surrender. After all, if his kingdom was destroyed, what would the Elven King do even if he defeated the Holy Dragon Kingdom? Watson thought if he went to the Elven Kingdom quickly, he would be able to finish off the elves before the Elven army attacked the Holy Dragon Kingdom. That way, the war would be settled once and for all. Then, Watson did not hesitate to take the three women and leave the mansion. They headed toward the direction of the planetary fortress main gate. At the main entrance, two officials led horses that looked like they had wings on their backs. Powerful gold-tier magical beasts came before Watson. "Your Highness, these are the best magical beasts in the planetary fortress, the Pegasuses. They can travel thousands of miles in a day. You can ride them if you are tired of flying. There are still 3 minutes before the planetary fortress turns to the south. Then, it will be the closest to the forest of eternity. Your Highness, you should set off at that time. Well done. You guys are thoughtful. Your Highness, you flatter us. Those are all things that City Lord Dina instructed us to do. The two officials waved their hands repeatedly in the face of praise. Watson did not expect Dina to manage those people so well within a day of becoming the City Lord. Watson sighed. He had asked Dina to become the new City Lord because Fox would supervise the Planetary Fortress army. He was worried about the other officials in the city, so he had asked Dina to do it. Coincidentally, Dina was an intelligence officer with the Severed Fingers gang. As the City Lord, it was more beneficial for her to receive news from all over the kingdom. Initially, he had been worried that Dina would not be able to manage the city well by herself. So he had invited a few high-tier Demoness bandit gang members from Mount Creation to take charge of the Everything House's management and help share some of the pressure. It seemed like it would not have been a problem for Dina, even if he did not do so. As expected, that genius from the Royal Academy did not disappoint him. After waiting for about 3 minutes, the management opened the entrance. Watson, Nia, and the other women rode their Pegasus into the air and flew in the direction of the Starlight Barrier. As Watson approached, a wide crack appeared on the Starlight Barrier, allowing them to fly past. With Watson's strength, it would not take long for them to arrive at the Elven Kingdom if he continuously cast teleportation spells. However, he did not know how many elites remained in the Elven Kingdom for the time being, so it was better to conserve some of his physical strength. He could also use the Pegasus speed to rush to the Elven Kingdom in time. Your Highness, if we reach the Elven Kingdom later, can you not kill them first? Instead, let me negotiate with them first. Having witnessed Watson killing Beta and creating a magic source, Delta no longer held any hope for the Elven Kingdom to capture Watson. Even if the elves used supernatural evolution to remove their restrictions, they still would not be able to defeat Watson. Even though she had only been in contact with Watson for a short day, she could already see how unfathomable that young man was. The most important thing was that Watson could fuse with monsters. He did not even need to fight against the Elven army. He only needed to use his fingers to activate the technique. The initially hostile Elven army had become Watson's subordinates. How should they fight such a battle? Sure. Watson looked at Delta and nodded. I don't wish to use force if it can be resolved through peaceful means. After all, I'm a peace-loving person. That's great. Delta agreed respectfully on the surface, but she cursed in her heart. If Watson were a peace-loving person, he would not have chosen to infiltrate the Elven Kingdom and attempt to destroy the Elven Kingdom internally. There was still half a day before they arrived at the Elven Kingdom. It was enough for her to think of a suitable way to negotiate. Perhaps, through her negotiations, the elves would be able to withdraw their army after they understood Watson's strength. Even though the Elven King was obsessed with the Holy Dragon Kingdom, he was not reckless. He would not make any moves until he received information from their spies. As long as she could convince most of the elves, she would have a chance to change the Elven King's mind. As for the method of persuasion, it was simple. She just needed to let Watson show off his amazing ability in front of the elves. If it did not work, she could let Watson use that terrifying fusion magic to turn the few elders to his side. Sacrificing a few elves could protect the interests of the entire race. Will I become a hero if I can protect the elves from the dangers of war? Delta thought proudly. At that moment, Nia's expression changed. The angel wings on her back spread open as she flew into the air and looked downward. Master, I detected a strong energy fluctuation not far ahead. It seems like the Elven army is moving. Elven army. Without waiting for Watson's response, Delta waved her hand and said, Impossible. The Elven King has sent the assassins to infiltrate the planetary fortress only a day ago. Why would they act before they receive the information we have gathered? It would have been meaningless to see us. I seem to have felt their movement as well. They are right in front of us, Claudia said as well. It's impossible. Delta continued to refute and then looked in the direction the two women were talking about. She was stunned when she saw the Elven army charging toward the planetary fortress at high speed right in front of them. The Elven king had led that charge. All the elves were shouting. Kill the humans! Fight, fight, fight! What was going on? Delta was at a loss. The Elven king had not received any information, yet he had sent the elves to charge at them. Had they gone crazy?